My name is Eric Ntie and I'm a Microsoft MVP. Today, we are looking at how we can restrict access for users as far as Copilot is concerned. Microsoft has introduced Copilot, OpenAI, and we are now having a lot of access to data through the users of Copilot. Copilot has been incorporated into Power Apps and almost all the Power Platform products, and therefore there are instances that we would like the data to be restricted based on probably the level of position of a particular person or based on a number of factors. And so that is what we are in to look at today. We will look at how to restrict data at the back end, and we also look at how to restrict data inside the Power Apps. It's a various scenarios that we are going to check out. We hope this is going to be a very useful discussion, and thank you. Okay, so to begin with, I have my Copilot here. Then I also have a data table. The Copilot, in the items property, I have linked my table to it, a database table, and I have also linked the same table to the data table. So let's look at my table. This is my table, which I have named payroll. I have the ID column, first name, last name, the period or the month of the payment. I have the position of the staff, then also have a salary that was paid for each of the months, and then the full name. In the same way, I also have a table that contains the users who will be logging into the system. I have created a group for each of them, and I also have their positions. In addition to that, I also have a view, and the view I have named it payroll. To be able to create a view, you just click on new, and that is, I will link how to create a view below. So I have already created a view, and then I have also selected some columns that have to be showed in the view, and I have filtered the view to show only Emily Davis. Okay, so let's go back to the Copilot and then try to interact with the Copilot. Okay, so to begin with, I'll have a prompt that I would like to use. David Wilson is one of the staff in the database. How much does he earn? And I'll bring the question mark. So we are waiting for the response from the Copilot. Okay, so it gives David Johnson earns $2,500. It has given all the salary that David Johnson has earned so far. I think the last one is 4,100. This is David Johnson, 4,100 for the month of June. So clearly, we are able to interact with the data, and then the Copilot is able to also give us response. Now, this is a full interaction with all the data that is available to us. But we want to restrict the user to be able to access some of the components of very sensitive data, sometimes about the salary or some employee data that you wouldn't want it to go out or want to restrict the access. As it is now, we have a full access to it, and that is why we are able to look at that. So to restrict access, there are multiple ways of going about it, and the first way that we are going to look at is to restrict it at the back end. And so as I told you earlier, I have a payroll data and I have created a view, and the view I have created some filters here that I only want a particular group of people to be shown in the Dataverse. And so I am showing only data that contains Emily for now. Okay, so anybody containing the word Emily as the full name is shown. Now what we can do is to now connect this view into the Power Apps Copilot, so that the user can only interact with data that contains these particular columns as well as the full names. So let's go back to Power Apps Copilot and then try to connect this and then interact. So let's go back to the Copilot. So inside our Copilot, in Power Apps, I have connected on the items property a view, the view that we created. I've connected it to the view, as we can see from the data source here. Now let's try to interact using the same prompt that we used earlier on when we had the full access. So when I click on the send button, it's so sorry, I don't know one yet. I am always learning. So Emily Davis is not part of this data that is connected to the Copilot, and so it's not able to. So let's, for instance, change the name to Emily Davis. And then let's see the response that we get from the Copilot. Okay, so clearly it gives us that Emily Davis earns 4,000. And so this is one of the ways that we can restrict Copilot. You can use the views in the data source, and this can be applied to other data sources. So if you are using an Excel, or you can use a SQL server, you have to make sure you trim down the table that is being connected to the Copilot to be able to restrict access. So we move to another way of restricting access, and that will be restricting access using show columns and then remove columns and all those things. Now the disadvantage of using the backend, for instance the view, to connect to the Copilot, it doesn't make it dynamic enough. And so sometimes you have another way that when a particular user logs in, certain columns should be shown, and then when maybe a higher person logs in, for example a manager logs in, all the columns should be shown. So in this case I am going to use the add column, show column, drop columns, all those things to be able to restrict which columns should be shown when a user logs in, to be able to interact with the Copilot. And so as I said earlier, I have a user information here, the user address, the group that belongs to, and so on and so forth. And then on the onStart property, I have a formula here. I have a formula here on the formulas property that I'm using to collect the user information when the user logs in. So here I'm collecting the group that the user belongs to, and I'm also collecting the position. So when the user logs in, I know the user's position, and then I know the groups that the user belongs to. So on the items property of the Copilot, I have this formula here. If the user is equals to a manager, or if a user is a manager, then I want the whole table to be shown. Otherwise, I only want to show columns. For this particular table, I'm showing only the full name, the position, and then the period. And so, for instance, I have logged in as a technician, and so I should be able to see only those with technician positions. So let me go in for the position of technicians. Okay, so we have the David Wilson, Chris Lee, and then Frank Clark. So for instance, if I should ask the salary for, say, John Doe, who is also part of this, we have John Doe, and John Doe is a manager. And so if I should ask John Doe using the Copilot and I click send, it says that John Doe earns 0 salary, and which is not true. John Doe earns per our system about 5,200, but this time even though it is showing that John Doe is in the database, it is saying that John Doe earns 0 salary. It is not able to disclose how much John Doe is earning because I have logged in as a technician, and therefore I don't have full access. I've logged as a technician, and therefore per the formula that is on the Copilot, if I am not a manager, then the salary column shouldn't be shown. Okay, so what if I ask this same and I say that John Doe is one of the self in the database. What is his position? Let me try this and see. I earlier asked about the salary of John Doe. Now let me ask about his position. The John Doe's position is not specified in the provided data. Okay, so let me ask one of those positions. So we have David Wilson is a technician, and is clearly a technician, and I'm also logging as a technician. So let me click enter. It says that the David Wilson earns 0 salary. Clearly, it indicates that the column salary is not displayed because I have logged in as a technician and not a manager. The last bit that we are going to look at is to restrict the rows that have to be shown. Let's say row access, the rows that have to be shown. So in that case, I will go back to my screen, and then I have a similar function or similar code on the Copilot. So if the user is a manager, then display all, otherwise filter the position that is equal to the person who has or he has logged in into the Power Apps. So for instance, I have logged in as a technician, and let me go for technician. So I'll ask the same question, and then I'll click send. Earlier on, we didn't get an answer or a response to this because the column wasn't shown because I haven't logged in as a manager. Now I log in as a technician, but because I am restricting for data for only those that are having the position as managers or as technicians, then I am able to indicate exactly, I'm able to access the data that belongs to the position as technician. So I hope this is very useful, and the reason why Copilot is now gaining grounds is that because we are able to easily interact using natural language, it becomes quite easier for the user to be able to interact with the data, and that is all that the opportunity we give to the users to be able to access data. But as we have shown, it is sometimes very important to restrict certain portions of your data and then graduate it based on who is supposed to have access. Thank you very much.